5. We're going to talk about credit. We're going to continue our series. You could ask me anything that you want to know about your credit, your personal credit, and cleaning up your credit. So let's get started, okay? All right, one moment. Okay. All right. So we've had our series on credit and credit building, and we're just visiting any questions, that we might have over and about credit, okay? All right, so I have my notes here if anybody wants to talk about anything specific to their scores. Let's see. If anybody has anything specific that they want to talk about, be more than happy to answer your questions. Good morning. Thank you for joining me. Today we're talking about credit, asking anything that you want to know about credit. We've been doing a series of videos on personal credit, and we've been actually talking about how to clean up our credit so we could be able to buy the things that we want to buy. So again, this is an open forum. If anybody has any questions on personal credit, how to get credit cards, how to become users on credit cards, etc., we are open to the forum. Again, I always ask that you be respectful on the forum and on the community as we speak, so we can answer any questions. So far, we've talked about the 5 things that compromise our credit, and we mentioned the big 5. And we talked about the payment history. We talked about utilization. We talked about the length of your credit history. And we also talked about the mix and basically obtaining new credit, rebuilding after, going through a hard time with our credit. Before we open up our Q&A, I do want to talk about being able to get credit, to rebuild credit after going through a hard time with credit, because it's not a lot of people really talk about rebuilding credit, but rebuilding credit is just as important as establishing credit. So there's a difference. Again, rebuilding is just as important as establishing credit. Okay, so let's just quickly talk about how to reestablish credit. And when I say reestablish, this is for somebody that has had credit before, and after having credit through, no fault of their own, they end up getting bad credit. So let's talk about how to rebuild credit. Let's talk about how to do it. So how do we rebuild credit? Well, first of all, when you rebuild credit, you have to be able to pay down your debts first. And once you pay down those debts, lenders now start to check your credit profile and see that you have a less debt to income ratio. So when you have less debts or you have less things on your credit profile, you're able to qualify for more things. You're able to qualify for more loans, okay? Or hence credit cards. So once you start building your credit, you could either do it through regular credit cards. You could try to get a regular unsecured credit card. And if that's not working, most times you could open a secured credit card. Now, in terms of the unsecured credit cards, when you're trying to rebuild your credit, they might have it where the interest rate's really, really high. At that point, since you're trying to rebuild the credit, you don't even care if the interest rate is high. You just want to get your credit going. You just want to get it started. And you can start with a smaller amount. You could start with possibly 500 to rebuild the credit with the secured credit card if you're not able to get the unsecured card. But the bottom line is that you just want to get the card. Some people also use store cards to rebuild their credit. It doesn't really matter as long as it's some type of trade line and the trade line is on your account. With that trade line, you can easily, as long as you're revolving it each month and the credit bureaus, the lenders see that you're doing that, it'll help you to build your credit. So those are some things that you can do to basically rebuild or to reestablish credit. Now, why do we need to reestablish credit? Sadly, we live in a society, in a world where credit is everything. If you don't have any credit, you can't buy anything. If you want to take out a cell phone, they're going to run your credit. If you want to purchase a vehicle, they're going to run your credit. If you want to buy a home, they're going to run your credit. If you want to rent an apartment, they're going to run your credit. Anything. I think even now in this day and age, if you're getting auto insurance for your vehicle, for your car, they're running your credit. They want to see exactly how you're able to manage money. My personal opinion, if somebody's, getting somewhere to live or they're trying to get insurance for their car, I mean, credit shouldn't be a factor. What should be a factor is that you have a job to pay for it and you could verify that. But unfortunately, places have requirements. And so in order for you to get certain things done, you have to meet their requirements. So if you are trying to, say, for example, rent an apartment and the landlord or the company runs your profiles that you've had a bad credit history, your credit score is low, you're delinquent on your bills, they're not going to think that you're a good candidate for renting their place. So as a result, this is why it's so essential in paying your credit the right way. Another thing that I want to discuss about credit is that a lot of people think that credit is just credit cards and loans, but having good credit goes a long way. It also goes with, again, when you're trying to get housing, you're trying to make other purchases. If you don't have credit or you don't have an established credit history, nobody's going to trust you. Nobody's going to want to give you anything. There's not going to be any incentive. Now, a lot of times people might say, well, I'm not really renting anything right now. I'm not buying anything, so I don't really need to know about my credit. But there comes a time when you will need to use that credit. So if you're not using your credit the right and proper way, it's going to be hard for you to open up and get anything. So the big question here is, how can I establish my credit? How can I get it? How can I reestablish my credit again? So first thing that I would do is I would probably use those utility accounts to reestablish my credit. Utility accounts are good because they report to all three credit bureaus. Those are one way. Secured cards are also good for establishing credit because, again, those are accounts that you fund. Authorized users, being on people's credit, is good for, reestablishing your credit or beginning your credit. But on this slide, we're talking about reestablishing credit. That's exactly what we're focusing on. So we just want to ensure that we're able to rebuild and start again. Now, let's say, for example, you've tried endlessly to reestablish your credit. You're having no luck. You're having no avail. This is where I always mention, getting an authorized user credit card, going on somebody's card, checking somebody, ensuring that whoever's profile that you're going on, that they could basically, carry you on their credit card. And when they get a good credit reporting, it's going to report to the credit bureaus under your social security number. That's another great way of establishing your credit, right? Some people also mentioned that you can do prepaid. Again, prepaid is fine because, it's prepaid with any account. A lot of people prepay like stuff like their cell phones or certain other bills. Whatever you do or whatever you prepay, they'll only allow you to use it for a certain amount of time as opposed to getting something that's extended a long period of time. So that's also fine because there are some reports that actually report. There's some accounts that actually report to the credit bureaus, whether they're prepaid or not. That's also a good way to reestablish your credit. The most important thing and the key thing that we want to realize is that we have to have things that are reporting. This is where I always talk about the trade lines. Okay. There's also another great company. If you needed to get a trade line to reestablish your bill of credit, it's another great company called Tomo, literally TOMO. Tomo has all these different things where you can get the trade line on your credit. But of course, with any services, you have to pay to start it. So you can start with Tomo to get trade lines on if you want to reestablish credit. All right. The other place that you can use to build, or as we're saying today, is to reestablish credit is on Kickoff. Kickoff trade lines, you can start with a simple $5. And again, with Kickoff, they report every single month and they tell them when you make a payment. The good thing about it is that with Kickoff, they could, they could deduct it simply. So you don't have to have the hassle or the worry of trying to pay for your credit each month, trying to pay for your credit cards or your bills each month. With the Kickoff trade line, it's being automatically debited from your account. I like that. I think it's good because it takes off the sense of responsibility on you to personally, make those payments. It's a little bit easier to do it that way when you're having it automatically debited. That's a great way to do it. Another thing that you want to do when you're trying to reestablish credit is you want to basically look through your check systems. You want to look through your check systems and you want to see on your check systems if anything has been, reported on your profile. You want to also contact LexisNexis. You want to get all of those reports that shows exactly what's on it. The three credit bureaus do offer a complete detailed report, but beyond that, there's also LexisNexis and there's also check systems. You basically need to see what is being reported about you. Like what's on your record? What do they have out there in terms of credit? Because sometimes, although you might not be able to see certain things or pull certain things, if you're able to look at those other extensive reports, you can basically see what other people have written or what's on your credit profile. All right. It's so important. I also want to mention the reason why we need to check before we even start reestablishing credit is because you have to understand lenders periodically check. For example, all of those letters that you receive in the mail, all those credit card offers, how do you think they know who to send what to? They know who to send what to because they check it. They run credit reports, they run checks, they run histories, they see exactly what you're doing on your credit profile, right? So again, if you're having a hard time establishing credit, you can simply get the trade lines on there. I mentioned 2 trade lines. I mentioned Tome and I mentioned Kickoff, and start reestablishing your credit. And you could also get store cards to reestablish credit. Those are just some of the things that you can do, right? Okay, somebody just said about how, okay, John said, how long do you have to have the credit open to officially reestablish? Well, as I mentioned before, credit history is important. Length of credit history on your credit profile is 15%. And here I have a list of it, of your total credit mix. Your length of credit history is 15%. So the payment history is the biggest one, which is 35%, but your credit history is 15%. If it's me and I'm trying to reestablish credit, for example, like let's say I was able to get that trade line with Kickoff or with the other company called Tomo, I would basically keep it going for a year because remember, you have to kind of show them for a year that you can, pay your bills, you can accurately pay your bills on time. You don't want to get it and after your score goes up maybe 20 or 30 points, like you decide to cut it off. Because just FYI, whenever you have an account, and let's say you have a credit card, I'm just throwing something out there, and you are fortunate enough to pay the credit card off, never ever make the mistake of closing the credit card. Never make the mistake of shutting the account down. Now, some people might say, well, I don't want to keep it open because when I keep the credit card open, it's going to make me want to spend it or use it again. And I struggled so hard to pay it off. I'm not essentially saying that you need to reuse it, but if you have a a trade line or a credit card account that's paid off, that's excellent. You want to keep it. If you keep it, what you want to do is when you keep it, let's say you have that credit card that you paid off maybe a month ago. Okay. Now you want to use it again. And when I say use it again, I'm not talking about making like a big purchase. I'm not talking about buying something extravagant. If you have a credit card that you paid off and you have a certain amount of limit on it, all you really have to do is just buy something simple. Okay. You can use that credit card to buy your morning cup of coffee. You can use that credit card to put gas in your car. You can use that credit card to make simple, small purchases. Maybe you do your grocery shopping that week, use the credit card to do your grocery shopping. Once you do those little things with the credit card, the trick and the key to reestablishing that credit and to get the credibility, to get the lenders to start trusting you and look how you manage money. The key to doing that is basically paying it back on time. So I mentioned the utilization rate, and I said that they typically, and I say they, like, the credit gurus, the credit people, they typically advise that you should, spend at least 30% of what you have. So as I always say, if you have $1,000 and the 30% of the $1,000 is 300. So if you have the 1,000, you spend 300, you want to try to stay under that. Stay under the 300, okay? Or a maximum 300. Circumstances happen if you happen to make a bigger purchase and so forth of more than 300. Your goal would be to pay the minimum. I'm sorry, to pay more than the minimum when the bill comes due, because they are going to ask you to, to pay the minimum. And again, you have to understand, credit card companies or banks are in the business of making money. If they ask you to pay the minimum, it's a plus because maybe that's what you can afford to pay. But on the flip side of it, again, let's say you have the 1,000 credit card and you end up having to spend the whole 1,000 and you decide to pay. If you were to sit there and pay that minimum off for all of those years, it's going to take you a little time. It's going to take a long time. So the goal is trying to, pay off a lot more when you're trying to establish credit. Now, when you're paying a lot more and lenders see that you're responsible with your credit card, there is no reason why it wouldn't keep reporting it. There's a reason why it wouldn't establish more of your credit. Okay. You have to basically set a goal and say, hey, listen, now that I have this credit card, I'm going to end up paying more. And if I end up paying more, maybe that'll increase my credit limit more. They'll see that I'm more responsible. Those are just some of the things that you have to do to, reestablish credit. Okay. Somebody's saying, what are some cards that you can use? So, okay. If you go, Credit Karma is really good with this. If you go onto Credit Karma, and you look, especially if you're somebody that has a weaker credit score, Credit Karma always recommends, I'm sure other websites too, but I'm a member of Credit Karma, so they always show me different things, different offers. They don't just show for credit card, they show for every single thing. Whatever your personal finances, whatever's on your credit report, or whatever, they see that you Google, they'll pick it up. But somebody asked before, they said, what are some cards that you can use to reestablish your credit? I always see the Great Capital One. I see another company called Open Sky. I mean, there's so much credit card companies. And if you don't see anything come up in your Credit Karma profile or your credit profile when you go online, all you have to do is just Google credit cards if you're trying to establish for first time credit card holders, or you can Google credit cards to be reestablished. Okay, those are just some of the things that you can Google. I always tell everybody in my videos, I always tell them in my lives that my best friend is Google, because I always use Google to look things up. So if I'm in the market and I'm shopping for a credit card, of course, I am going to Google the best credit cards. And sometimes the credit cards that I might apply for, it can also be through word of mouth. You might have a credit card that's a really good product, interest rate is good. Keep in mind that when you're using these credit cards to reestablish credit, you want to basically, I always advise, just like when I tell you to pull your credit reports, I always, I always advise that you should basically like compare them. You ever see like a comparison like online? Maybe when you Google it, you'll see like 10 different credit cards. And once you show the 10 different credit cards, it'll show you like what the benefits are. If you have like, let's say 10 cards, you might see in column A, you might see them line up, exactly what interest rate it is. Some of these credit cards have travel mileage on it. Some of them have supermarket incentives. Some of them have entertainment incentives. Some of them have cashback incentives. All right. You want to try to pick credit cards other than just rebuilding or building your score. You want to pick cards that offer incentives for you to become a card holder. Those kind of cards are good because not only are you reestablishing credit with those type of cards, but as you're spending, as you're reestablishing the credit, you're getting cash back, you're getting rewards, you're getting travel rewards. I know people that use their credit cards for travel rewards. You get like a certain amount of mileage, like, and whatever mileage you use, if you want to travel, it goes towards the fee of your airline ticket. So those are just some of the things to keep in mind when you're looking for credit cards to basically reestablish your credit. Now, let's talk a little bit more if you've been searching for a credit card and you don't like the fees that are on the credit cards. Okay. So they all have fees, they all have an APR, they all have an annual percentage rate. Again, that's the way the bank makes their money. They're going to charge you for giving you that credit. They're going to ask you to pay a certain interest for giving you credit. So with that in mind, that's why I say it's so important for you to literally shop and see which credit card is the best one for you. The biggest thing that I always compare when I'm comparing credit cards is I always compare the interest rates. I literally look at what credit card A is going to give me, what B or C is going to give me. Now, be careful. You don't want to get a credit card where they're giving you a high amount, but the interest rate is through the roof. Maybe sometimes you settle for a lower amount, and when you settle for a lower amount, there might be a lower interest rate because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be responsible for paying that interest. And the trick to it is once you have the credit card and you start making those payments on time, you start making those payments every month, you really don't necessarily have to, shop and get multiple credit cards. If you have that one credit card that's basically revolving and, you're paying it each month and your score is going up and so forth and getting increases, why not continue with that card? Once you've reestablished credit and everything is going well, then I would suggest, because remember, you've already built a history with this one credit card that you have that you were initially using to reestablish, right? Once you reestablish credit, right, with the other credit card, once you reestablish credit, you're building again. You just continue the same way to build it up. That's what it is. It's all about building in steps, right? Let's also address, I want to talk about when you're looking for new credit. Now, remember, I gave 100% of what you need of the percentage that makes up your credit profile. And new credit or additional credit is 10% of your credit profile. Now, whenever you run or whenever they run your credit profile, they pull your credit, that's an inquiry that goes on your credit card. Okay, inquiries do ding your credit card. They do ding your credit profile. Whenever you look for credit, whenever you apply for credit, whether you get the credit or not, it makes your score go down or it makes your score just a little tiny bit. I always give the example that if you're in the market and you're shopping for an auto loan, and if you're shopping for the auto loan, it can possibly, because because the car company runs your credit so much, that could basically make your credit score go down. Okay, but again, they know that you're in the market, you're shopping for something. That's exactly how it is when they run your credit, when new credit comes on. Again, everything, there's a give and take with everything. If they're running your credit and they're seeing what's on it, what have you, you're going to lose a few points. But I mean, I personally, I wouldn't care if I lost a few points if they ran my credit and I'm shopping for something or I'm trying to reestablish credit because, in the end, I'm going to end up getting the card. I'm going to end up reestablishing and building my credit. That's all that really matters. That's all that I really want to do is just to get my credit started again. So I don't care if they run it. The good thing with inquiries is that inquiries stay on for like a year and inquiries easily fall off. You could have a person that has like, I don't know, like 50 inquiries, and within a year, like most of them drop off, if any, depending on the date or the anniversary of the date of the inquiries. So inquiries are things that you can easily get off if you decide that you want to, change, your credit profile if you want to change or you want to get a boost on it. Okay? That's what it is. Excuse me one moment, please. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for waiting. Right. So, that is exactly what it is with reestablishing credit. Reestablishing credit. Someone says, how many credit cards should I have or how much should I get? Okay, there really, in my opinion, there really isn't any limit on how much to get or how much you should have. I mean, when I was reestablishing credit, because I did go through a time where I had to reestablish my credit, been there, done that. When I reestablished, I just started with one. I literally initially started with one, and after 6 months, because again, I was paying it on time and I was doing my due diligence and I wasn't making any late payments and all those things. When I did that, I ended up having more. I ended up having more credit cards. I ended up getting more credit. I didn't have to, worry so much about not having credit, not establishing credit. So yes, start with one, but as you're doing well, and your credit's growing, you can apply for credit. You can apply for other cards. And credit is not just credit cards. Credit comes in different ways. Credit comes in loans. For example, let's say you go to a store to, take out some furniture and you apply for a payment plan. Well, again, remember it's a bank that finances, so that's a way and a form of doing credit. It doesn't really matter. You still have to do credit. It doesn't really matter. You still have to what's the word? You still have to apply for credit. So what you get or how many you have, it doesn't really matter. My big thing is that you just need to start. You just need to be able to show the lender that you have a payment history. You need to show the lender that, that you've been managing your money. Show the lender that you've been paying your bill on time. Show the lender that you know how to make your payments. Show the lender that you don't have all these late fees. I talk about lates. I talk about 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, 120 days late, up to 180 days late. Any lender sees that they're not going to want to give you anything if they think that you're not going to pay them back or pay your bills on time. So it makes sense for you to, to have your start with one and eventually grow to more than one. Right. Any more questions? Any more? Someone also said, name the credit card company that you started with. Oh, this is so many years back. But if you're looking to start or you want to start or get a credit card, you could always start with or rebuild with Capital One. Capital One I think is really good. They do give a lot of people chances, but as with all banks, if you default, they're gonna come get their money. That's how it is. But I don't think anybody's gonna default and so forth. I think everybody's gonna do really wonderful because you want to establish and you want to keep that credit. So it's actually a good thing. Right. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad that this is inspiring and this is, making people want to change their credit profile. You see, I learned about credit the hard way. It was rough for me. It wasn't hard for me to initially get credit as a new person. It wasn't difficult. What was difficult was maintaining and keeping the credit card. That's what was difficult. And why was it difficult? Because again, you got to make those payments, and credit is something that nobody taught you about. Nobody teaches you about credit. Nobody tells you that you should spend your money this specific way. Nobody does that. And so because nobody teaches you that, you just end up spending it. You're like, oh, I have a card. I have money that's borrowed. Oh, I can just use it however I want. No, you can't just use it however you want. You have to be able to spend it wisely. And once you spend it, just know, you have to be diligent. Just know that you have to pay it back. That's how credit works. Right. Someone also said that they had a credit card that charged off even though they were making payments. Yeah, so charge-offs are in itself not a good thing. Let me explain what charge-offs are. Charge-offs occur, I think, 180 days after you defaulted on a credit card. That's after they've warned you and they've told you and they've asked you to make their payment. When I say warn you, that's when they send a letter to you and they've been asking for you to make your payments and you haven't. That's when the account charges off. That's when basically the lender, gives up on it and they write it off, with their insurance and all those things. It writes off for them and, they get some type of money on it, but it's bad for you because it reports a charge off on your credit. So even though it's charge off and they're not actively collecting on it, they're still pursuing that debt. And how they're pursuing that debt is that they're blemishing your credit report. So my advice or my opinion is that you don't want your loan to get into charge off status. You don't want your loan to be defaulted. You want to be able to pay on your loan. You want to be able to, make at least even the minimum. Now, I never said that paying the minimum is bad, but the reason why I always emphasize to pay more than the minimum is because when you pay more than the minimum, you end up with, like when you pay more than minimum, like you save on interest. You save on interest and you pay the card off quicker. I seen a dude on one of the social media platforms saying that he pays his credit card off every Sunday. He says he uses his credit card literally each week like a debit card. Now we know the difference with debit and credit. Debit is basically where, it draws it automatically from your bank account. That's what debit is. Okay. Credit, on the other hand, it's borrowed. It's not like instantaneous. Credit is from a lender. Okay. But debit, you spend what you have. Some people say, that debit cards help them to build their credit profile. No, it doesn't. A debit card doesn't do that. Debit card just allows you to buy stuff and, use your card right away. And it's instantaneous. Is once you do a debit, the money comes out right away. It's not like with credit where the money takes a little while to come out. So that's the difference with debit. Okay. Debit is instant right away. Credit, yes, it comes out, but it takes a little while for it to actually go through or to get credited to the account. So that's the difference with debit and credit. Uh, okay, somebody said, which one do I think is better? I don't. It depends on what transaction you're doing. If you're doing credit, if let's say you're going on vacation, you're taking a flight somewhere, use a credit card. Heck, it doesn't matter. It doesn't bother you. It won't bother you to use a credit card because you paid over time. Now, if you decide to buy that ticket with debit, it might take a little while for it to come out. It might take a little while for you to bank up all the money to do it. But whatever money you have, you're gonna have to have the exact amount of money to withdraw the debit right away. So, you have your pluses and your minuses when it comes to debit and credit. If you're a person that don't like to owe anybody and you just want to spend your hard-earned cash, you just want to spend your money, then the debit is good for you. If you don't have the cash right away and you want to use credit, credit is also good. All right. Credit is good only because it gives you time. It allows you to pay for it over time. But this is where I talk about it, that people should not abuse or, use their credit wrong. They shouldn't do that. People should not use their credit wrong. People should be able to use their credit to buy what they want to buy, but at the same time, pay it back in time. And this advice or these sayings, these are so cliche. They tell us 1,000 times. We'll watch so many things that'll say, oh, do this instead, do that instead with credit. They'll tell us to do all sorts of different things with credit, but my advice is start with those trade lines. Once you start with those trade lines, you have something to work with. And while you're spending it, that it's building up your credit. Okay? So that's exactly what trade lines do. Right? Carrie says that credit sometimes tricks people into spending what they don't necessarily have. I don't know if it's a trick. Yes, you will or you can buy more things than you than you necessarily have to spend. For example, if it was your debit or it was your regular bank account and you knew you only had $100, you're not going to purchase things over $100. In comparison, if you have a credit card and let's say you have 500 on it, you're going to go buy stuff for 200-300 because you got the credit there. But the question is, will you be able to pay it back next month? Are you going to be able to do it next month once the month comes around? That's where people really need to, measure how they're going to use credit. I never disagreed with using credit. Okay. Someone else also said that it's something that gets you in trouble. Well, like anything, if you don't use it or you don't spend it wisely, of course it's going to be hard for you to pay it back. But what I always tell people is, if you use a credit card and let's say, you use, your minimum on it is like 30. Heck, pay 35 or pay 40, pay a little bit more. Pay a little bit more on your credit so you don't have to end up defaulting in the end. See, the thing with credit is there's nothing more wonderful than being able to just borrow from your credit card or borrow from yourself. Those are one of the big things that I talk about on my channel that a lot of people don't realize the beauty of basically, having a relationship with the bank. When you have a credit card, that is establishing a relationship with a bank. Okay? That's establishing a relationship with a bank. You don't have to worry when you borrow from the bank that people's going to find out that you needed to credit something or use a little money on your credit card. You don't have to worry that people are going to make fun of you because that is your own credit card. All you have to do is just pay your credit card each month or pay your credit card off. And the good thing is, the difference with borrowing from your credit card and borrowing from somebody you know personally, when you borrow with the credit card, etc., it's a lot easier because you're responsible. You know when to pay what. You know exactly when to pay what. So it doesn't really matter. Okay? It doesn't really matter. You just have to basically, pay your credit card on time. Right. That's what you have to do. Somebody else said that a lot of these credit cards charge a higher interest rate. Yeah, they do. I mean, as I said, banks are in the business of making money. And, there's always somebody out there that needs the help. So if they can make their money, they're going to charge. They will charge. They don't necessarily do it out of a malicious way, but they will charge. Right. They will charge. Definitely. They will charge. Hold on a moment. Just keep your questions coming. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Again, if anybody has any more questions about credit, about credit cards, about the beauty of credit cards, about establishing or reestablishing credit, I'm all ears. Just go ahead, ask away. Somebody said, was it difficult? Richie says, is it difficult to pay more than one card? I wouldn't say it's easy, but again, you're only going to spend a certain amount of money on each card. I always advise to stay under 30%. Heck, I'd even say 10%. But we have to be realistic. Everybody's purchases or everybody's expenses are different. So however amount you decide to spend on your card, you just have to ensure that you'll be able to pay it back. That's all. And if you could pay that money back, then why not? You spend it, but you use it wisely. You see, a lot of people get in trouble with credit simply because they don't know how to spend it. They don't know how to spend it. They don't know exactly like what they should do to spend their credit card. They don't know what they should purchase on. Some people buy unnecessary things, but I always say that if it's necessary, you feel it's important, then heck, spend your money, spend it, but just pay it back wisely. Just pay it back. Spend it wisely and pay it back in a good amount of time. Don't sit there and let the payments be late. Another thing I want to mention is don't let your credit card go over the limit. When you let your credit card go over the limit, they charge you a fee. They charge you an over limit fee. Just like when you're late, they charge you a late fee. In other words, they charge you for everything. Again, banks are in the business of making money. Banks are not in the business of just giving you money without anything. Why do you think they have interest on their credit on the cards, or they have interest on loans? Right. That's how they make their money. That's how they stay in business. If they just gave you everything willy-nilly and free, then there wouldn't be no point for them. That's how banks are. Right. Banks are in the business of making money. For sure. Definitely. Yeah. Somebody also said, have you ever felt it was difficult to pay off an individual card? Of course. Of course. It's not easy. It's not easy to pay off a card. It's not easy to pay any loan for that matter. But you just have to do it. I often tell people too that if you find that you're having like difficulty paying your credit card, I always tell people to call the lender. Call the lender and basically, let them know that you need an extension. Sometimes they might be able to push the payment back. Something that I personally done. It works. It works. You see, the thing about credit or about any financial product is a lot of people don't talk to their banks, or they don't talk to people who they have the loans or the credit with. They just sit there and let it consume them. You have to let them know if you're having difficulty, or it's going to be hard for you to make a certain payment, or it's going to be difficult for you this month. You have to let them know. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It is very interesting. But at the same time, you know, money is something that we have to learn how to spend, and we have to know exactly what to do with our money. So once we do that, it's a lot easier for us to, it's a lot easier for us to spend, or it's a lot easier for us to build our credit. That's the goal. When I started this series on credit, I really wanted people to be able to dive into their credit reports, see what's on there, see what's written about them. It's basically, credit 101, learning about things, 101, the basics, new start, new beginning of learning how credit really works. That's exactly what I wanted to do. When I launched this, I decided that, I was doing this because a lot of people didn't know about their credit. They didn't know how to spend it. They didn't know what the utilization is. I had a gentleman say to me the other day on the live, he said, well, I didn't know that my payment history was the biggest thing. At what, 35%? Of course. I said, yeah, of course. They watch how you pay back your bills. They watch how you pay money. They watch those things. If they feel that you are not, making your payments sufficiently on time, they're not going to give you any credit. That's exactly how it is. They're not going to do it. Right. Marianne says, do credit bureaus give second time to dispute? Of course. You can dispute over and over and over again, the credit bureaus. Now, keep in mind that your disputes also have to be legitimate. Okay? You're not going to send a dispute for a bill or a collection that you know is definitely yours. They're going to flag it. Okay? They're going to definitely flag it. They're going to say that no, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, maybe the first time, if they don't suspect, they'll investigate it. But if you keep sending the same dispute that has been proven time and time again that it's yours, they're not going to allow you to do it. Okay? They're not going to allow you to do it. They're not going to allow you to do it. So, in my opinion, I would literally just send legitimate disputes to them. Okay? Does anybody else have any more questions for me regarding, the credit bureaus? Any more questions? Any more questions on established credit? Any more questions on your payment? I'm sorry. Any questions on what makes up, your credit profile? Any questions on the payment history? Okay, well, if nobody has any more questions, I thank you for joining me. As always, it's always great to, discuss and talk about credit. Again, today's session was Ask Me Anything or Ask Me What You Want to Know About Credit. All right. You have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much. And again, if you haven't before, please comment, like, subscribe, share. Give me your thoughts. You could always leave a question in the comments if I wasn't able to answer the questions today. Just let me know exactly, what you're thinking, what's on your mind, and what you want to know about credit. And upcoming, I'm also going to be doing, a live on, the aspects of getting business credit, because a lot of people want to know about that. So just let me know what it is that you'll be doing. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.